Today I'm here to present the second forecast update for Budget 2021-22. This is an opportunity to share information with the public about the province's economic and financial position. I'll say a few words and then take your questions. Over the past 2 years, Nova Scotia's economy has experienced volatility and uncertainty due to the pandemic. And with the recent increase in case numbers and the Omicron variant, we know that Nova Scotia, like the rest of the world, remains in a period of uncertainty. However, if we look at the whole fiscal year, we are forecasting an anticipated surplus of $108 million. This is an improvement of $693 million from the $585 million deficit estimated at budget time. This improved position is primarily due to better than anticipated economic performance and improved provincial revenues. Nova Scotia has shown positive signs in recent economic indicators. Our economy contracted by 2.5% in 2020, but that was the second lowest of all provinces and significantly better than our previous estimate of a 5.3% reduction in economic growth. Exports have returned to pre-pandemic levels. In November, we rose above pre-pandemic employment levels, and we've hit the highest level of employment on record. And just last week, Nova Scotia's population hit 1 million. While the overall Nova Scotian economy is improving, we are still seeing that progress is uneven, and there are sectors and industries that remain heavily impacted by COVID. This overall improved economic performance contributes to higher than anticipated revenues. Our total revenue is now projected to be $12.8 billion, up $1 billion from budget, with improvements in personal income tax, corporate tax, HST, and motor fuel tax since the September update. We also have one-time prior year adjustments of $349 million, which reflects both updated revenue information for 2020 and better economic performance than what had been expected. On the spending side, total expenses are projected to be $12.9 billion. This is an increase of $379 million from budget, largely due to our COVID-19 response and additional investments in our government's priority areas. Over the past few months, we've been able to make significant investments as well as have an improved financial position. We are directing more funding into health care and healthcare professionals, seniors care, housing, and programs that will support communities and our economic recovery. Throughout this pandemic, Nova Scotians and businesses continue to do what is needed to keep each other safe, and we are seeing good results from that care, compassion, and strong public health care policy. While our economy has performed better than expected, we still anticipate that economic activity will fluctuate over the coming months. As the past week has shown, the pandemic will continue to cause uncertainty for our people, our businesses, and our economy. Because of this, we are committed to listening and responding, to taking bold action to move our province forward, and at the same time, managing the province's finances with a steady hand. In closing, I want to thank staff at Finance and Treasury Board and across government for their contributions to this update. I will now be pleased to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Minister. So again, we'll begin to take questions from media. I'll call on the reporters on the line one by one, and it'll be a one question, one follow-up format, and we'll cycle through as time allows. So first up, we have Jean Laroche with CBC. Go ahead, Jean.
I'm going to pass to Mike Gorman, my colleague, please.
Mike?
Thanks, Minister. It seems odd to ask you this question in the circumstances of what we're dealing with right now, but can you talk about to what degree the positive shift we've seen since September is a reflection of our province's ability to open up and act in a more free, perhaps pre-pandemic way than other provinces have been able to do?
I think that's played a huge role. While the numbers that we're looking at today that have made the big impact here, while we found out about them recently, largely from the federal government, from Statistics Canada and Revenue Canada back in November, Those numbers relate to economic activity that's been going on the last couple of years. So Nova Scotia's ability to avoid extended lockdowns has contributed significantly to the fact that our economy has kept moving, and we've kept people have continued to purchase and consume, and people have been able to continue going to work. So, and you see that reflected in HST, you see it reflected in personal income tax and corporate income tax, and we're even seeing in motor fuel tax, which is driven primarily by more driving, not necessarily by because it's a flat tax. It's evidence that people are driving more. So there's certainly times, I think, when public health will discourage travel like they are right now, but if we look back to your question, the way Nova Scotians have responded to the advice of public health in this province has made a huge difference in the revenue numbers we're seeing here today.
Go ahead with your follow-up, Mike.
Thank you, Minister. And I wonder, you know, you've reached the point now where you're starting to build the budget. You're well into that. How does being in a far more optimistic financial position right now than what we were looking at last spring inform your approach to the coming budget and what you'll be able to do with that?
Our approach won't change because if you look at these revenue numbers today that are really telling the story of today, they're one-time revenues. And we can't expect those kinds of positive, I'll call it a surprise, to happen going forward. So we will be disciplined. We're just about to begin the budgeting process. It will be our first budget process as a new government. We're going to be focused on our mandate, the items that we focused on during the recent election, and what we've committed that we will carry through in our platform. So we'll be focused on those items, and but we, to answer your question, the revenues we're seeing today are nice, but they're not going to be changing our approach going forward, primarily because they're one-time revenues.
Okay, next up we have Paul Bacon from All Nova Scotia. And just a quick reminder, if you're not speaking, anyone please on both lines mute your call. Go ahead, Paul.
Minister, some of the changes we're seeing in this forecast are because the forecasters earlier in the year were a bit pessimistic about where our economy would be, but some of the things you're talking about are very tangible. Job levels at above pre-pandemic levels, exports and so on. Are you surprised by the strength in the Nova Scotia economy, regardless of the pandemic?
I would say yes and no. I think that I was surprised when I saw the numbers coming in. However, I think we all know there's certain sectors of the economy that have done quite well. I think about housing prices, building material sales, online shopping. There are certainly, we see even at one of the Crown Corps I'm responsible for, the NSLC, we see the abundance of sales activity there. So people are still consuming, and in many cases people are still working. That's not to say there aren't sectors of the economy that are still hurting and remain very uncertain, but for some sectors they've done well. So in that sense, it shouldn't be a surprise, I suppose, but when I did see the numbers come in, I was surprised.
Go ahead with your follow-up, Paul.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have Callum Smith from Global. Go ahead, Callum.
Thank you. Minister, the forecast update says the 2022 pace of rebound is slowing because the economy has already caught up to pre-pandemic trends. We've already heard a bit about that, but I guess it obviously notes with the exception of tourism-related industries, but I'm wondering how you predict the recovery of those sectors and what you can detail us for us in terms of expectations moving forward with tourism, if anything.
I can appreciate your question. It's certainly something that's on the minds, and I think you've mentioned the tourism industry, and I know it's been a difficult period for anybody in the tourism industry. and they're looking to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Things do remain unpredictable. I think about the announcement that was made on Friday in support of businesses across the province. Just 2 weeks before that, we were being questioned about funds that were at Dalhousie for supporting business, and little did we know that 2 weeks later we would be spending that money. So unfortunately, I have difficulty, and I think we all have difficulty knowing when more certainty is going to come to sectors like tourism. And what we're seeing now with all across the world with the Omicron variant is that it is causing lots of disruption, and particularly for sectors like tourism, for travel, for hospitality.
Go ahead with your follow-up, Callum.
Thank you, and thanks for that, Minister. I guess I'm wondering what else you might be able to, project for us moving into 2022. Do you expect these trends to continue of being, a bit better than originally anticipated? What can you share on that front?
I think what I would say to that is we'll certainly be trying to share more when we table the budget in the spring. Today's forecast update is looking towards the end of March. We will certainly be making efforts to provide any indications we can going forward, but that would be something we would more focus on in the spring budget.
Next up, we have John McGuinness from CTV. Go ahead, John.
Hi, thank you for taking the call. There was a lot of feedback earlier. I'm not sure if this question was asked early on or not. I couldn't really make out what the question and answer was. Minister, how optimistic are you for 2022? And where will the province see economic growth moving forward?
I think with the advent of the pandemic back in 2020, there was great uncertainty, and nobody knew where we were going. And I think what we've seen since, as the numbers show today, that while certain sectors of the economy were hit very hard, others moved along as they always did, and some even did better. So going forward, we may see more of the same. The world has changed. Companies will need to adapt to our new world. The healthcare sector itself will have to adapt to the new world we're in. What has become atypical with testing and vaccines may become more typical going forward, and the healthcare system will have to adjust. So what I would say overall is I think we are seeing trends revert to the mean, as they always do, and that includes, I know I was reading about the Bank of Canada saying that, that in terms of inflation, they think that what's happening now is transitory, and they believe that things are moving back to normal. So we'll be watching. Central banks around the world will be watching things like inflation and whether or not to increase interest rates. But at the end of the day, I think what I would tell you is we're starting to see the economy move back to normal rates of growth. I do say that recognizing that there are many businesses out there that continue to struggle, and we have to be mindful of them, and particularly during this holiday season, which is an important time for Nova Scotia businesses. We're hopeful that some of the supports we actioned on Friday will help them at a time that is critical for them.
Go ahead with your follow-up, John.
That's good for me. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next up, we have Danielle Edwards from the Canadian Press. Go ahead, Danielle.
Hi, Minister. I just have a quick question. Now that we are seeing some pretty high numbers of COVID, how does the Omicron variant and the recent spike kind of play into the economy for 2020 in the province? With this latest budget, does it take into consideration that despite some hopeful signs, we might not be in such good shape come, say, mid-year?
We would certainly take direction from public health based on their expertise in what they think could happen. Right now, things, once again, with a new variant and a new wave, things are moving quickly. We're watching other jurisdictions. And we did in the past have advice from public health in terms of possible lockdowns, and those were incorporated into past budget modeling. But I can tell you at this point, we do not have that kind of advice at this point looking forward to the coming year. That could change come the spring budget, the tabling of the spring budget. I would expect there could be more on that for you at that time.
Go ahead with your follow-up, Danielle.
Nope, I think that's everything. Thank you so much.
Okay, and next up we have Jennifer Henderson from the Halifax Examiner. Go ahead, Jennifer. Are you there, Jennifer? Okay, we do have a couple of minutes left, so just circling back. Jean, did you want to go ahead, or are you deferring to Mike again?
The only problem was in response to the minister's second answer to a question that was put by Mike, some bonehead, whether it was on the line or at your end, started playing tape of the minister, and it got all garbled. So if the minister could go back and talk a little bit about that second question by Mike, which was, how do today's numbers kind of affect going forward? Let's see if we can recapture that magic, if you will.
Can you just repeat the question again for the minister, Jean? That you want him to re-answer?
Yeah, if you could just, if you want to go ahead, do you remember the question?
I can hint. I think the magic is always best the first time, but I'll try my best here. So the question was, I believe, about how do these numbers we're seeing today, which are a very pleasant surprise from a revenue perspective, how do they translate going forward? And what I would say to that is these are one-time revenues, and they're not something that will be informing any change in our plan going forward. We're just about to begin the budgeting process for the spring budget, and because these are one-time revenues, we're not expecting to see these kinds of pleasant surprises going forward, and as a result, we'll be aiming to be fiscally prudent, but also focusing on our mandate that we achieved in the recent election, and the focus on health care and fixing health care, and we indicated that we would deficit spend if necessary to do that. To fix health care. And I guess I would throw in also that it's an uncertain time, and like we did on Friday, we want to be responsive to businesses out there across the province, and if there's a need, we will not be too rigid. We will aim to be compassionate and focused on helping to minimize the impact of the pandemic so that businesses can continue to move forward and continue to be here with us long into the future.
We have time for one last question. Mike Gorman from CBC. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you. Minister, putting on your labor relations hat for a moment, how does the current climate we're in and these numbers we're seeing today inform the way that you will enter into bargaining with the many, many contracts that you have steering for the coming year?
Well, I think at the end of the day, we want people to feel valued wherever they work in government, whether it's in the education system, in our hospitals, in our nursing homes, throughout the civil service, people working on our roads. So nothing changes from that perspective. I think perhaps when people see significant revenue increases coming in like this, they might think this could be the start of a trend, but I need to highlight that these are one-time revenue increases. And, we've also seen the need where government has to go into operational deficit to be supportive of the economy and to be supportive of the healthcare system. So in terms of negotiations, all of that will be at the negotiation table. We respect collective bargaining. We want to respect that in the sense that we want to keep those discussions there. And we are also focused on trying to fix a lot of the work conditions that people face, and I think particularly in health care and in nursing homes. And those things can cost money too, and we also know that they benefit the people that go to work every day in those environments.
And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This concludes the news conference.